Ryan Wilson gave us his very last, his 500th and final mock draft
of 2023. I
want
to know what number it is, by the way.
I feel like we've got the top couple picks locked in. If you look into the numbers from Vegas, it's a lock that Bryce Young is going number 1. Our Jonathan Jones told us that yesterday. Bryce Young is going to go number 1 overall to the Panthers. And now Will Anderson Jr., he's minus 500 to be the 2nd overall pick. Minus 500, so that appears likely. Interesting that Ryan's going with Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon, 3rd to the Cardinals. Then he has a couple more quarterbacks. CJ Stroud to the Colts at 4, Anthony Richardson to the Seahawks at 5.
All right, let's take a look at 6 through 10 here. Devin Witherspoon, by the way, is the betting favorite to be the first cornerback off the board, but you saw Christian Gonzalez at number 3. Ryan has Witherspoon going 6th overall to the Lions. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's your first wide receiver off the board to the Falcons at 8. He is minus 450 to be the first wide receiver taken.
You had that Aaron Rodgers trade, and that switched things up here in the teens. The Packers move it up to 13. He has them taking Broderick Jones, an offensive tackle out of Georgia, and the Jets, who moved back to 15, taking Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame, who's minus 200 to be the first tight end drafted.
16 through 21. By the way, this is again Ryan Wilson's final mock draft. You can find it on CBSSports.com. Want to highlight Tyree Wilson there. He was the favorite to go number 2 overall yesterday. Ryan has had him in his top 5, but he has him all the way down to 20 going to the Seahawks.
Yeah, the odds to go number 2 have been fascinating. Wilson was a favorite. Levis was a favorite. Now it's Anderson, a heavy favorite. And how about this from Ryan? Will Levis all the way down at number 25 to the Titans. And that's just 4 quarterbacks in his first round. He does not have Hendon Hooker going in the first round. He does have the Bills taking a wide receiver for Josh Allen, Jordan Addison out of USC. That is the final mock draft from Ryan Wilson.
Let's welcome in 2 guys who spent close to 20 years combined in the league. CJ Douzable here on set, Brady Quinn joining us as well. Both of them going to be part of our coverage throughout the entire night tonight. We're going to go through teams that have 2 picks in the first round. Let's start with the Texans there, picking 2nd and 12th overall. The big question is, do the Texans go with a quarterback at 2? Ryan, his final mock, does not have them taking a quarterback. He has them instead going with Will Anderson. A lot of people wondering, is CJ Stroud an option there? Lige, who do you got him taking at 2 and 12?
Yeah, I have them taking CJ Stroud at number 2. I think if you're the Houston Texans, you got to be careful, right? Say you win 5 or 6 games, and we know the AFC South is not really a competitive division, right? Who says you're going to be in the market to take a guy like Caleb Williams or Drake May next year? I think you take a guy like CJ Stroud, and I know they're in love with Bryce Young, but CJ Stroud is the best pure passer in this NFL draft at the quarterback position. I mean, has elite footwork, throws with great accuracy. And then at the number 12 spot, I think you go Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think this Houston Texans team has done a really good job of overturning this roster, right? They added Robert Woods. Let's not forget, John Mechie comes back from his illness at the receiver position. Why not get CJ Stroud, a weapon he's really familiar with? To me, the best route running receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he does a lot of his dirty work in the slot position. And yes, he's not a blazer, but he's just really crafty as far as being able to get open at the top of the route. So if I'm the Texans, I'd be leery of not taking a quarterback, because who's to say that you're number 1 or number 2 pick next year to get your guy of the future?
Brady, you tend to agree there, huh?
Yeah, we have the exact same picks, because I will be absolutely shocked if the Texans don't take CJ Stroud, or at least a quarterback, at number 2. It's a big need for them. They're in a position to do it, as Leger just talked about. To me, Stroud, I think, is the most NFL ready in the sense of, next to Bryce Young, in the sense of looking at what he was asked to do in Ryan Day's offense at Ohio State. He's the most accurate passer in this draft class. And I think if the logic is that you want to take a great player at 2 and then think you're going to get a quarterback at 12, there's no guarantee. You'd probably have to continue to keep moving around. I know there's a theory that with DeMeco Ryans now as the head coach, he looks at taking Nick Bosa and the success that the San Francisco 49ers had defensively, even despite their quarterback situation at times. But let's not get it twisted. Let's actually look at that entire defensive front and not just Nick Bosa. You had first-round picks between Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Javon Kinlaw. We could go through the years of different first-round picks. Dee Ford was there at one point, who they picked up. It wasn't their first-round pick, but someone else's. They loaded up that defensive line. So a lot of their success came from not just Nick Bosa, but the entirety of that defensive front. And if that's the logic, I'm not buying it. You got to take a quarterback at number 2, and it makes a lot of sense to provide more firepower with that quarterback on offense. It's a need for the Houston Texans, and I think it would make a lot of sense moving forward for their future.
I mentioned Will Anderson minus 500 to go number 2 overall. Right behind him is CJ Stroud at 4-1. Will Levis is 6-1 for the Houston Texans. We're talking about the 4 teams that have 2 first-round picks tonight, 2 of the 31 overall picks. The Seahawks are another one of those teams, and Brady, another one of those teams that people are thinking maybe they take a quarterback. They've got Geno Smith. He's coming back. Anthony Richardson might be there. What do you think?
Yeah, it could make a lot of sense if they want to, give Anthony Richardson a little bit more time to, sit, learn the NFL game, learn the system. Geno Smith's deal is really a 1-year kind of prove it deal. Then we'll see. And so if they feel like they're looking for extraordinary talents and skill set, Anthony Richardson is your man. I mean, there's no one with a higher ceiling at the quarterback position in this year's draft class. He's a dynamic athlete. He's got the strongest arm. He makes things look easy. And I tend to believe he's actually got a pretty solid foundation of skills. He just needs to become more consistent with it and continue to get more reps and grow in the position. So I could see them taking a quarterback there at 5. I tend to think that if you do see a run on quarterbacks, or if we see 3 quarterbacks taken potentially in the top 4, maybe even just 2, you'd still would be looking at some of the best defensive players. It'd be really hard to pass up on a guy like Jalen Carter sitting at defensive tackle for you. We know that's how Seattle has utilized their first-round picks in the past, usually taking defensive players. They plug them in, they play right away, they make an impact like that. Devon Witherspoon, if he lasts this long, could make a lot of sense, but cornerback too, if Pete Carroll's trying to get back that legion of boom, if you will, and building up the defensive side of the ball. Or I could see them trading back from that 20th pick. Honestly, that's another thing you got to keep in mind with the Seattle Seahawks. They like to move around in the draft. John Schneider is a wheeler and dealer, so I'm not necessarily even sure they'll stay put at 20. They might have to trade up if they wanted a guy like Devon Witherspoon before he drops to them at potentially that number 20 spot.
Yeah, Brett, I was surprised you had Devin Witherspoon at 20. I think he's going to be long gone by then. He's my number 1 corner. But I like what you went when you went with Jalen Carter. To me, makes the most sense at the number 5 spot if everything checks out off the field and you're comfortable bringing him into that locker room with a guy like Bobby Wagner at linebacker again. I mean, this Seahawks defense was abysmal against the run game last year. Gave up over 150 rush yards per game, almost 5 yards per carry. Jalen Carter helps you in that department from day one. He destroys blocks. He's hard to block one-on-one situations. And then I went on the edge with Myles Murphy. If you look at it, Uchenna Nwosu, Darrell Taylor, they're on their last year of their deal. They're going to get some youth on that edge and bring more firepower. Talk about retooling that defense. You talked about the Legion of Boom. Let's not forget when they had the Legion of Boom, right? The pass rush they had with Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, Red Bryant. Now they've really overturned that defensive line. If they bring in Jalen Carter, Myles Murphy, Draymond Jones, who they signed in the offseason, and Jaron Reed, I think this defense could get back to that elite status with those young corners in the back end. And we talk about Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen. So to me, it makes more sense for them to take Jalen Carter. If he's there at number 5, I think they should run the card up, but then double down at the defensive line and get Myles Murphy at that next pick.
Guys, let's talk about the Lions here. Look, who made great strides toward the end of the season. They just kind of ran out of time there, picking 6th and 18th overall. Brady, you have them going with a cornerback and an edge rusher. That is the same positions that Ryan Wilson has. You just have different names than him. Who do you like?
Yeah, I mean, kind of pick your poison for trying to figure out which of the Detroit Lions like best. It could be Witherspoon in the spot, it could be Christian Gonzalez in the spot. Those are kind of viewed as two of the top cornerbacks in this draft class. But for me, with the trade of Jeff Okudah, I think we all know where this is headed for Detroit. They need to have a lockdown cornerback. Gonzalez is that amongst a couple others in this draft class. The difference with Gonzalez is you don't have the concerns about his size like you do with Witherspoon. Looking at the defensive end and Luke Van Ness, a guy like Myles Murphy, who Leger just mentioned earlier, both those guys could be sitting there around this spot. You put someone opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, and that defense continues to improve. That really struggled this year. I mean, bottom line is the Detroit Lions had one of the worst defenses in the league. They need a lot of help on that side of the football. So it makes sense to load up with your 2 first-round picks to not have to be in a shootout every single game.
Yeah, Brady, this defense gave up nearly 400 yards per game last year, and they did a really good job of kind of retooling that secondary. You talked about them shipping off Jeff Okudah, but they brought in Emmanuel Mosley and also Cam Sutton, who was more of a slot corner, also brought in, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to really lock down that safety position. But at that second pick, I'm going to go Michael Mayer, right, because they lost T.J. Hockenson during the middle of the season via trade. Why not get some more firepower for your quarterback, Jared Goff, somebody that can attack the seams? And we all know Dan Campbell, he likes physicality. He wants to establish the run. Well, Michael Mayer is a true tight end. He took it upon himself to become a better blocker this year, and you see it on film. He got after guys as far as blocking in the run game. Again, a guy that's really crafty at the top of routes. He's not going to kill you with speed. He ran a 4.70 in the 40-yard dash. But he's a guy down the seams that can really separate and go up and get the ball. But their first pick, I took a corner like yourself. I took Devin Witherspoon. I think he could really solidify that secondary, which was a weakness but could become a strength now.
All right, the other team that has 2 first-round picks, the Philadelphia Eagles, came so close to winning it all. They locked up Jalen Hurts long-term. They've got the 10th pick. They've got the 30th pick. Seems to be a lot of smoke around potentially taking Bijan Robinson. I know Pete Prisco had them taking him with the second first-round pick, 30th overall. Some believe if they want him, they better take him at 10, Brady.
I'm right there with that train of thought. He's a phenomenal back, both him and Jahmyr Gibbs, and those are 2 players who I think are going to go tonight in the draft. They're too good to pass up, and I know Pete Prisco seems to think running backs grow in trees, not these types of running backs. And here's the other thing that you'd like to have, and it's kind of short-sighted on the side of Pete to not see this. You'd like to have an extra, a fifth year with the fifth-year option isn't going to necessarily kill you at the running back position, so you have control of these guys for 5 years. And look, if you want to run them for 5 years and then turn them and burn them, so be it. But Bijan Robinson in that backfield next to Jalen Hurts with all the weapons they have on the outside of wide receiver, I would love to see that combination. And then Myles Murphy, talked about it a minute ago. Everyone's going to have varying degrees of how they see the defensive ends in this draft class. I have Murphy as a first-round pick. Could very well go higher than this, but I think he also would be a fit for an Eagles team that, has a number of guys who are getting up there in age. Brandon Graham decided to sign back, but you could see him rotating in that defensive front, one of the nastier defensive fronts that they have, and eventually becoming the guy a year from now.
Yeah, Brady, they could go Bijan Robinson, but I actually like what they have in the backfield. Kenneth Gainwell, to me, played really well down the stretch on that playoff run. A sneaky free agent signing to me was Rashad Penny. Over the last 2 years, he's led the NFL in yards per carry. Now, the biggest thing with him is can he stay on the field and stay healthy? But I went with Peter Skoronski right there at the number 10 pick. Now, he may be gone at the number 9 pick with the Chicago Bears, but if he's there at 10, I like it because Jason Kelce is getting up there in age. We know they took Cam Jurgens last year. He's going to naturally fall into that center position. I think at guard, they lost Isaac Samala to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Peter Skoronski could fit in that position. And then Lane Johnson, we know he was beat up last year and played throughout that. But if something were to happen to him, I think Skoronski could kick out to right tackle. To me, he is the most technically sound offensive lineman in this draft. And at the 30th pick, I took Brian Branch because the Eagles lost both of their starting safeties. Marcus Epps left and went to the Raiders, and we talked about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson earlier going to the Lions. And I think he has that same skill set that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has, that slot flexibility. They blitzed him a lot. He's a real tough guy, can tackle in open space. Maybe a little high for him, but I had him as a high second-round pick. If you want a game changer in the late first round, I think Brian Branch makes a lot of sense.
CJ, Brady, just the beginning of a very long day for both of you. Both CJ and Brady are going to be part of our draft coverage throughout the night tonight. We want to remind you to download the CBS Sports app if you would like to join in. They're going to be breaking down every single pick there. We have all of our experts that are going to be joining us. Ryan Wilson, our draft expert, our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, Josina Anderson, Pete Prisco, Bryant McFadden, all of our fantasy guys. Make sure to download the app so you can tune in.